Well, the NHS is under increased pressure. The number of people in hospital with flu is quadruple the total of this time last year. And New York police have this evening released new images of the man suspected of killing the boss of one of America's biggest healthcare firms, including this one of him seen nearby, smiling broadly. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and the FT's Whitehall editor, Lucy Fisher. Welcome and great to see both of you. So, as ever, let's take a look at the front pages. Quite a theme, to be fair. The Telegraph leads on the Prime Minister's new blueprint for government, adding that he's watered down two of his key election pledges. The Express tells the PM you can't keep ignoring the biggest problem, Sir Keir, as it reports on him failing to include plans on immigration. Daily Mail calls Starmer the George Lazenby of Prime Ministers, as it reports on his new plans. The Eye quotes him on telling the public to judge him on whether living standards rise quickly in the UK. The Times reports on the Prime Minister vowing to push through reform of Britain's planning system. NHS facing a quademic of emergencies. The Guardian writes about hospitals being busier than ever as we head into winter. Daily Mirror says hospitals could be hit by 4 different viruses this cold season. The Metro pictures the so-called smiling assassin who yesterday shot dead the chief executive of America's largest private healthcare firms. Financial Times reporting on plans which could lead to the breakup of Thames Water. And the Daily Star warns its readers of the Christmas foods that could contribute to their baldness. By scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of those newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head to Aubrey and to Lucy. A big day for the PM, not a reset, obviously. We now have milestones. And in fact, the Daily Mail at the top, helpfully, Aubrey, have listed what we've had so far. What have we had so far?
Well, we've had 7 pillars of economic foundation, 6 milestones. Those were what were unveiled by the Prime Minister today. Are you singing the same song as me? But anyway, I know, it is Christmas time, isn't it? 5 missions, which, to be fair, Sir Keir set out in February last year, and 3 foundations. No partridge in a pear tree yet. It's the joke you'll hear people make all day and through the rest of the month. But, yes, I was in Pinewood earlier to listen to the Prime Minister unveil this speech. I think, in some ways, trying to reduce the amount that this has been a sort of technocratic exercise in coming up with a list of targets and trying to make it much more palatable and, if you like, give a retail offering to people so that they can start to see in tangible terms how they are going to benefit from the Labour government's plans. Because in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, how many people are going to turn around and say that, you know, they feel like the UK is now a clean energy superpower? What they probably would notice is how much their bills have been reduced by and things like that. So this is an attempt, really, to try and give that retail offering to voters.
We're only just beginning to forget Rishi Sunak's ones, aren't we? You know, like stop the boats and halve inflation. Do these stick in the mind? Because clearly the Daily Mail thinks not. Starmer's bingo hall parade of buzzwords and political nerd speak. He clearly doesn't think the public will be ingrained with this.
Well, I think the issue here in part is the layering of all these different priorities, milestones. Will they become millstones round his neck? I do understand the thinking behind it, which was that many of the missions are quite nebulous. Some of them take a longer time frame, this decade of national renewal that Starmer's talked about to achieve. And something like being the fastest growing economy in the G7, well, that doesn't mean anything to the voter in the street with regards to how they feel about the pound in their pocket. So I understand trying to bring it down to a more tangible level, particularly after seeing what happened in the US election. In fact, by the end of Biden's tenure, the US economy was going fairly gangbusters, but people didn't feel good about their household income. They've suffered a period of high inflation, struggles with household budgets. And so I think they've learnt the lesson that the American public did not reward Biden for the economy going well on a macro level. But I do think that, you know, I meet Labour MPs who struggle to name off the top of their, tongue the 5 missions. I think this could become a bit of a test on broadcasts for all MPs to try and remember these targets. And I spoke to someone, Whitehall watcher yesterday, who said is this a tactical error? You know, if he's all about delivery, then surely showing is better than telling.
Yeah, interesting. I think the US growth was more than 2.5% at the time of the election. So, as you say, going gangbusters, but not delivering for the incumbent. Daily Express also in a critical vein. You know, we're about to come to what's in. This is the what's out part, isn't it? Which was a lot of the questions too. You know, where's immigration? We clearly saw the figures under the Conservative government, 900,000 people coming in legally. You know, where's your ambitions on that?
Certainly, and I mean, Keir Starmer, I should preface this by saying, says that immigration is part of the sort of two biggest priorities that his government wants to tackle. But they didn't make the cut in either the missions or in the milestones that were announced today. And so there were lots of questions. I remember journalists standing up around me and asking, what are your plans to reduce both legal, which was obviously at a record high, we saw some statistics out recently, migration, and illegal or irregular migration as well. And all we got from the Prime Minister was continually saying that he thought it should reduce, but not necessarily explaining how, what the trade-offs might be in terms of, skills, shortages. And so it is something that the right-wing newspapers certainly are very keen to capitalise on tonight, suggesting that he has maligned this issue of immigration and not sort of put it front and centre in the way that some of the other big campaign pledges about 1.5 million homes and the growth in the economy that Lucy talked about, that was sort of slightly missing today.
You need those homes because of migration, couldn't you? And also you could argue that you can't reboot the NHS without migration and the jobs it provides for social care, for example, which is a really important part of relieving beds in hospitals. So it's all interconnected, really.
Yeah, but I also think on the other side, you could say there are big vacancies in the health and social care sector for which traditionally we have used inward migration to fill what are often quite low-paid roles. Similarly, in construction, if they have any hope of building, I think, 377,000 homes a year, they need, again, to import labour because there are shortages in the construction industry. And while there is this skills agenda, it takes time to get, new bricklayers and so forth through that pipeline. So I can understand why he swerved putting a target on it because, of course, Rishi Sunak and countless Conservative leaders failed. They did put targets on it and then failed to meet that and were punished at the ballot box. But also because there is this complex interplay between needing migration in some parts of the economy to shore it up. And, of course, it has been a big driver of growth in the past few years.
Well, that's why, some of those arguments is why the taps were turned on during the Conservatives, wasn't it? Anyway, those are the antis. What are the practicalities? So we might come on to some more antis. I'm looking ahead, actually. But anyway, what's the I saying on this one, then?
So they've really sort of honed in on Keir Starmer's promise around living standards. And there seems to have been some to and fro on this over the last few weeks. We've been told that there were discussions about setting a target on how much the government wanted to commit living standards to rise, which is quite a dangerous game to play, because then you are effectively sort of setting a target, all of the factors of which you do not control. And so the I talks about Keir Starmer telling the public to judge him on whether living standards rise quickly in the UK. I remember being in the audience earlier, the sort of questions, how much are you going to raise living standards by? And the answer just came back, people will know if they're better off at the end of 5 years than they do now. So again, in the same way as we talked about immigration, very wary of putting targets on some things, but then very keen to be specific in other ways as well.
Especially amidst the warnings that wage growth will fall because of the budget and the national insurance on employers, for example. Daily Telegraph suggests the PM drops pledges as the economy stumbles. Another of those points. What was the shaving off of the pledges then? How's it changed from, I've lost track, missions, pledges, steps, manifesto?
Foundations.
Yeah, foundations.
Well, yeah. Two key areas. I mean, one on that sort of macro growth target. Previously, they said they wanted the UK to be the fastest growing economy in the G7 over consecutive years by the end of this Parliament. They've dropped the time frame. So now it's sort of, we want to be the fastest growing economy in the G7 at some point in the future.
It's an aim.
And
That's
it's an aim. And then secondly, on green energy, and again, many people have been very sceptical of this idea that they will be able to meet their target to decarbonise the entire grid by 2030. They've now said that instead of 100% green energy, it'll be 95%. So to be fair, it's only a small reduction in that target. And Ed Miliband's trying to argue, well, for strategic reasons, we need to keep some gas reserves in the pipeline. But, that is a dilution of the target. And even then, many in industry don't think that the government is putting in enough state investment, and they are sceptical that there'll be enough private investment to get what many consider to be pretty much still a moonshot target by 2030.
And in terms of the key quotes from what he said, you know, this is throwing down the gauntlet effectively to civil servants as well, and then criticising civil servants in a Dominic Cummings-like fashion, certainly, which is sort of an interesting take. He's finding it glue-like, is he, to get some of these policies going in government?
It is really interesting. I think he has elucidated and spoken publicly about something for the first time, which has been constantly on the lips of lots of Labour figures who say that actually they've sort of got into government, you know, that they're feeling as though the machinery isn't working as quickly as they'd like it to be. And conversely, from the civil service side, I think their criticism is that they find that Labour has got into government and expected things to work as they did in opposition, i.e. that they could make decisions amongst quite small groups of people without necessarily needing to go through various layers of bureaucracy, and finding that they can't do that because the civil service machine is there to sort of reinforce and make them think several times about everything. And so we're hearing language today that actually wouldn't have sounded out of place from a Conservative politician.
Well, there's the quote, isn't it, that last part? Too many people in Whitehall are comfortable in the tepid bath of managed decline.
I mean, it sort of echoes, you know, the blob, the criticisms that we heard, you know, seemingly endlessly from Conservative ministers. And I do, you know, worry that if Labour sort of go too hard in their attacks on civil servants, they will find themselves that officials are becoming frustrated, they will feel like they're being maligned and not listened to. And indeed, I think you had the General Secretary of one of the trade unions for civil servants, Dave Penman from the FDA, you know, saying that civil servants don't do this sort of stuff. So picking a fight with the civil service is a dangerous battle if you're trying to get them to operate on your behalf.
Yes, and we were told we're not allowed to call it... Oh, I've forgotten what were we allowed to call it? A reset.
A reset.
So we were allowed to call it a reboot, and the Financial Times have gone for a recalibrate.
Recalibrate.
Very FT word from my own distinguished paper. Yeah, look, I think, again, drawing attention to the ways in which these milestones have seen a dilution of the initial targets. But again, you know, pointing out, going into some detail here on the other pledges he's stuck to, including this idea that the Labour is going to see 1.5 million homes built in England in the next 5 years. That is a level of building we have not seen in this country since 1977, almost half a decade. And recently at a select committee, Matthew Pennycook, the housing minister, himself admitted that it's going to be very difficult. There's a lot of scepticism. So I think some raised eyebrows today that Starmer recommitted to a target that many think he can't meet.
And I just showed the Times as well because Sir Keir Starmer has written for the Times, and in it he attacks the blockers and bureaucrats who he says have choked off economic growth and made home ownership unaffordable. We will return to that, no doubt, but later on this evening. In the meantime, next on our programme, we will have a story from Lucy that London Mayor Sadiq Khan will be knighted. That is up next.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
It's a Premier League double derby weekend on USA. First, on Saturday, Liverpool look to strengthen their title run against Everton in the Merseyside derby. Then Sunday, Chelsea aim to stay in the hunt when they face Tottenham in a London derby.
And this meeting might shift the dial in that derby.
The Premier League double derby weekend on USA.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
is really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
Yeah.
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's
Supply line right into the...
here in Los Angeles.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Aubrey Allegretti and Lucy Fisher. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to you and your story in the Times about who is going to be honoured in the New Year's honours. What have you learned?
Well, my scoop in the FT tonight is that Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London, the first Muslim mayor of the capital, and, of course, a Labour MP before that, is in line to get a knighthood. Emily Thornberry, another veteran Labour MP, now chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Houses of Parliament, is set to get a damehood, as is Pat Hewitt, the Blair-era Health Secretary. Few other key Tories in line for knighthoods, I'm told, including Andy Street, the former West Midlands mayor, and Nick Gibb, who, over 3 stints across 10 years in total, was schools minister.
Anything controversial about any of that?
No, I mean, there's a couple more Tory MPs we've learnt about. We believe that Ranil Jayawardena and Marcus Jones, quite low-profile former MPs who lost their seats in the general election in July, are also in line for top gongs. I think some people might think, well, we've not heard terribly much about either of these two. Jayawardena, a key ally of Liz Truss, did make it to the cabinet, but only very briefly during her brief stint in Downing Street. So there might be a few eyebrows raised about that. But overall, I think that these are less controversial than perhaps some previous gong lists.
Gong lists, yes, about. Absolutely. The Boris one, for example. Yes, I mean, Sadiq Khan, for some people, might be a polarising figure, and it always feels like it's politicians who go straight to the top on the gong list, don't you think?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, there are people who disagree with the whole sort of patronage system, but Sadiq Khan was a sort of long-serving MP before he went to become Mayor of London and has served for an unprecedented 3 terms. I mean, I know we haven't had the Mayor of London since before 2000, but still, he's the longest-serving of all of them. And there will obviously now be attention turning towards the political lists that are being drawn up. So by Rishi Sunak, he will get a resignation honours list, which is still being sort of wrangled over. And Keir Starmer as well is obviously coming from a position where Labour have fewer members of the House of Lords because they haven't been in government. They need to push legislation through, the argument goes, and so he will be expected to nominate a raft of people as well. I'm told that Rishi Sunak's list is probably going to be quite short in the resignation honours, partly because Labour insiders fear or say that he fears that they won't sort of sign off on his list. It's not a sort of Conservative PM handing over to a Conservative PM, but then Rishi Sunak's allies say, no, he's a sort of discreet guy, he just wants to give people recognition that deserve it.
Yeah, and people like Nadine Dorries didn't get signed off, did she? But anyway, that's another story. Let's go to the Mirror. We're for it now. These are the respiratory illnesses and others which are causing pressure on the NHS, just quickly.
Well, the risk is a quaddemic of flu, which is up 350% in terms of admissions to hospital. Norovirus cases up 86%. And, of course, COVID and RSV, the respiratory illness, also setting up for another potentially very difficult winter for the NHS.
Lucy, Aubrey, thank you both very much indeed. Good to see both of you. We're in it for the weather as well, so let's check out the forecast, shall we? After a mostly fine start tomorrow, it will turn stormy going into the weekend with disruption likely. So several weather warnings in place, including an amber wind warning for western parts on Saturday. Gales look widespread, damaging gusts up to 80 miles an hour possible in the west. Expect a cold and largely dry start tomorrow, with winds briefly easing from the west. There will be just a few showers for Scotland, some wintry. Britain will have plenty of morning sunshine. Western areas will cloud.
Exploration. Sky News, get the full story first. Exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
It is 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview, our top story. Missions, milestones, but no mention of migration. The Prime Minister's pledges to the public as he urges them to